Howdy and welcome to the guide. In the midst of the summoner meta, despite not receiving any buffs or changes at all, here I am playing Chains of Command. And I've gotta say, it's actually pretty good. If you're looking for a build that is really efficient and safe mapper, all the way into red tiers, you've come to the right guide. Let's get started. If you're not familiar, Chains of Command is an item that allows you to have an army of animated weapons that are based on your animated guardian's weapon. Basically, every time your animated guardian gets a kill, it summons a copy of its weapon. Then, every summoned copy of the weapon that gets a kill also has a small chance to summon another copy of the weapon. So, you essentially run around the map and let your animated guardian and animated weapons from Chains of Command kill things, and your army gets bigger and bigger. It's a stress-free and quite chill playstyle, and currently I'm playing a Magic Find version, so I can just turn my brain off and map. This has definitely become my go-to map and chill character, and it has been my best league starter ever. It's really cheap, as Chains of Command doesn't need to be 6-linked, only 6-socketed, so it has a very low currency cost to get your items, but it still can be easily get you into red maps. One common issue I always see people having when playing Chains of Command is when they get to red tier maps, their animate weapons start getting one-shot by tougher enemies. So I've personally been playing this with a much more defensive-oriented setup with my items, passives, and gems, and I've had no troubles at all in red maps. Blights, legions, etc. have been a cakewalk. I've decided to run Necromantic Aegis with a really good defensive shield. Most of the time, people would use Victario's Charity shield with Necromantic Aegis for the free power and frenzy charges to their minions, but I've decided to go with the Duresso's Courage shield. This shield has a high block chance, with the added benefit of getting more block chance for spells and attacks after blocking. Also, if brought to low life, they also get a big spell block chance boost. So all of my animated minions are running around at max block chance for attacks and spells a lot of the time. Needless to say, this makes them extremely tanky, and I haven't had any issues with them dying on red tier maps with more dangerous mods. To compensate for their damage, I'm running Oro's Sacrifice on my animate guardian, and thus that is the weapon that is being copied. It has a really high base damage and grants free frenzy charges to our minions when they ignite, as well as a free culling strike. For the Ascendancy, I decided to play a Scion Ascendant. The new Witch Necromancer Ascendancy doesn't really offer much to Chains of Command, since gem levels don't really affect Chains of Command because it's not a gem. Overall, I just felt like Scion Ascendant was going to be better than either Guardian or Necromancer. So, I decided to go Ascendant, and I've chosen the Guardian and Necromancer paths. I feel like this build could be played pretty well with the new Templar Guardian Ascendancy as well though. But overall, I felt like a Scion would be a little more flexible, because we have to travel a lot on the skill tree, and starting in the middle and having extra skill points helped out quite a lot. The new onslaught for minions from the Guardian Ascendancy is really nice, and feels really good, and Scion also gets access to that. It has made this build feel really smooth. Last, to be perfectly honest, this character is not a good boss killer. There is one inherent flaw with Chains of Command, and that is that your minions are on a timer, and if you aren't killing things, your minions will start disappearing. Also, if you zone into a new area, all of your animate weapons will disappear. So this means you really can't do Shaper or Elder Guardians with this setup. Even Guardians are tough, because the fights last a little longer, and a lot of your weapons will start timing out in a stronger map when you start to fight them. So, I can't recommend this character if you're looking for a boss killer, but personally, I completely ignored that aspect. I designed this character to be a strong mapper all the way up to tier 15s, and this character has easily hit that mark with flying colors. Just to let you know, there are some Chains of Command builds that are able to do Shaper or Elder by using the Scion's Pathfinder Ascendancy, so if you're interested, look that up. I just decided to focus on making a very strong, safe, cheap, and relatively fast Magic Finder mapper. Alright, now let's start talking about my items, flasks, jewels, everything real quick. So first, one more time, I touched about this on the intro, but of course I'm using Chains of Command. I just want to talk about this item first because it is mandatory for the build. I'd say maybe the only mandatory item, but I talked about how it worked in the intro section, so if you're still not sure, just listen to that part one more time. But you have to have this in your build or nothing is going to work. Like every time your animated guardian kills something, it's going to copy its weapon as an animated weapon every single time. So you have to have this in the build, and like I said before, you don't have to have it 6 linked. As long as you have it 6 socketed, all of your support gems that you socket in it will support the animate guardian's weapon skill. And you can actually see the animate guardian weapon skill in your skill bar thing. So you can check what support gems are actually supporting it or not just by looking on it here. So just be aware of that. But you don't have to have it 6 linked, which is really nice. It makes it really cheap. The only stat that varies on it, well, outside of armor and energy shield, is life. So I personally just looked for one with as high of a life number as possible. And it's a pretty cheap item, even at the early league. I think I got it for like a couple chaos or something. It was pretty cheap. Next, I want to talk about what my animate guardian is actually wearing, because I think this is really important. So, like I said before, he's using Oro's Sacrifice, and this will be what gets animated as you start killing things. And there's nothing really amazing to look for here. Just try to find one with a high fire damage on it, and that's about it. Of course, if you could get a good like attack speed, that would be nice too, because that would help. But essentially what this weapon does is it has a really high base damage number with the elemental damage, and then as you ignite enemies, or as your guardian and animated weapons ignite enemies, they get frenzy charges every time they land at ignite, which is nearly all the time. And then if they hit an ignited enemy, they get a coaling strike for free against it. So this is a really good offensive weapon. It has some drawbacks with your defense, but like I said in the intro, I'm doing a more defensive build otherwise, so I needed something to compensate with offense. If you wanted to do a more physical version, I think that Terminus Est might be an okay target, weapon as well. This is obviously full fire damage, so I'm running flammability, but you could run like Assassin's Mark, and I think that would make this work pretty well, because what this does is every time this weapon gets a critical strike, you gain a frenzy charge. So you just run Assassin's Mark. That gives your minions a higher crit chance. They start critting, they start getting frenzy charges, and they also get power charges when they kill stuff that has, Assassin's Mark on it. So they be getting frenzy charges and power charges. So I think Terminus Est would be a good option as well. I think your damage would be a little bit lower, but you'd be critting, so it might balance out a little bit. And your support gems would have to be completely different, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyways, the rest of my animated guardians weapons, or animated guardians gear. So we're using Oros for the weapon, using Ambu's charge for the body, and this is a pretty standard choice. A lot of people might use like a blood bond. I kind of like this a little bit more because you get more armor and a little bit of energy shield. But why this is good is because if you've been hit recently, you regenerate 2% of your life per second. And since your animated guardian has like 40,000 life, a free 2% more is actually quite significant. So this is a pretty standard choice that I can highly recommend. For the helmet, I'm using the Bringer of Rain. And one thing about the animated guardian is that the mod can't use chest armor. That only applies to players. So for an animated guardian, that doesn't matter at all. So you don't have to worry about like not getting anything out of Ambu's charge, unless that changed recently. I didn't know about it, but as far as I could tell, it seems like it's working. And both of these have a interesting thing that I was trying to build around a little bit. So for Ambu's charge, excuse me, getting over a cold. Sorry. If you take a critical strike, you get an endurance charge every time you take a crit strike. So that's one thing with this. And then this one, whenever you block, you have a 20% chance to gain an endurance charge. So I was trying to like just kind of pair some items together that would kind of generate endurance charges just to help my animated guardian survive a little bit more. Other things that make this a good choice is you get an extra 6% chance to block, a really high life number, and of course some armor and evasion, which is nice. The physical damage doesn't matter because Auros, you don't do any physical damage, but I was trying to get something that would generate endurance charges, but honestly I think most of the time things were dying so fast that he never had any chance to actually build up endurance charges. But that's one reason I'm using these gloves on him, is because Barusa's battering rams have synergy with endurance charge. I don't know if I can actually recommend these or not. I was just trying to see if it would work or not, but it seems like most of the time my animate guardian doesn't have frenzy charges, so I don't know if I can recommend these or not. But it does give him a little bit more movement speed, which is nice, and a little bit more attack speed, so it's not a terrible choice. You can use anything you want here though. And then Victario's Flight, and I think this is a pretty standard choice for animate guardian. It gives more movement speed, not only to your animate guardian, to all your allies around you. So if you're gonna go a movement speed option for yourself, this would help out a lot too and give you a free plus 10%. And yeah, so that makes it a pretty good choice. I think for sure Ambu's and Victario's Flights should be recommended here, but you don't necessarily have to go Bringer of Rain or Barusa's Batterman, but that's my guardian setup. And since we're using Auro's Sacrifice, you gotta remember that your animated weapons are going to be Auro's Sacrifice, so they're doing fire damage. So for your support gems in the body, you don't want to be using things like Melee Fizz, because it won't do any extra damage for your minions. So let's look at my gems. I'm using Multi-Strike, because your animate weapons can Multi-Strike. Elemental damage with attacks, this is probably like your best damage option. Minion damage, another great option. Feeding Frenzy, and I tried using Meat Shield, and I tried using what's it called, the one that targets Deathmark, but I felt like Feeding Frenzy was overall the best. Just having them always being aggressive and going and constantly seeking enemies, it felt pretty good. And then we're using Ruthless and Combustion, and I think Combustion is really good. It has a lot of synergy with Auro's Sacrifice, so it gives them a 49% more chance to ignite, and every time you ignite, you're getting a frenzy charge, right? So I think Combustion is pretty dang good. So that's my gem setups here. Next, I want to talk about my weapon and my shield. For the weapon, I'm using Bright Beak, and you can use anything you want here. I just decided to go with a Leap Slam setup, so Bright Beak is an amazing choice, and it's really cheap right now. I think I got it for like a Chaos maybe. And the reason this is good is because if you look at your attacks per second, you get 2.11 attacks per second, so you leap slam around like insanely fast. And it's just something to help make your build cheaper, because when you buy boots that have movement speed on them, like 30% movement speed, they start getting more expensive. So I decided to go with the leap slam setup. And another thing that makes Bright Beak good is the resistances. So I'm getting a free plus 57% resist, 27 fire, 30 lightning. So I really like this option. You don't have to use this if you don't want to. You can go for like a high attack speed rare weapon, and you can craft on some more minion damage. There's lots and lots of options, but for the links I am using Leap Slam, like I said, with faster attacks, and I just have flammability in here because I didn't have anywhere else to put it, but I will manually cast flammability occasionally on like the map boss, or like a really insanely hard rare or something, but I'm not using like any kind of auto setup to keep it going. I'm just casting it manually. And then my shield, so I talked about this in the intro. I'm using Duresso's Courage, and this is a really underrated shield in my opinion. I think it's like only in Alchemy also, but it's a really good defensive shield. So you have a really high block chance with this, and then if you block, if you look at the bottom two mods, if you block spell damage, you get a plus 20% more chance to block attack damage. If you block attack damage, you get another 20% chance to block spell damage. So it gives your minions a really high block chance, and since on the tree we are using Necromantic Aegis, those bonuses are all applying to your minions every time they block. And we're also getting more block chance for our minions here. So they're getting a free 15% more, like plus 15% chance to block spells and attacks. And they recover 2% of their life when they block. So it's a really, really good defensive mechanic for the minions. And like I said in the intro, I haven't had any problems with my Animate Guardian or my Animate weapons dying. And I've heard a lot of people talking about that being a big issue, so I can highly recommend the shield. I think it's underrated. There are some other choices, like some high life shields and other block shields, but I was just really trying hard to have my minions block chance essentially capped, and this shield is a good option for that. And in my links, let's check those out. So we've got here, this is Wave of Conviction. And again, we're using Oro's Sacrifice, so they're doing pure fire damage. So every time you hit something with Wave of Conviction, if you don't know what it does, let's look. It applies an exposure to the enemy for minus 25% to elemental resistances, matching the highest damage taken. So what it is, it's a physical damage spell, which 25% is converted to fire, 25% is converted to lightning. And so what I'm doing is I've got it attached to added fire damage to make sure that it's doing more fire damage than anything else, and that's applying a minus 25% to enemies' fire resist, which makes all of our minions do more fire damage. And then I'm also running Precision Aura. Now in this patch, the minion's accuracy did get buffed, but it's still not 100%. I think it's like 80-something% to hit like evasive enemies, but this is just a little bit more of a DPS boost. You don't absolutely have to run it, but it's felt pretty good for me. And it doesn't reserve a percentage. It reserves just a flat value. So I think it's pretty easy to run, and I feel like it's been pretty good for the build. So next, our helmet. Just look for a rare helmet that's got +2 to level of your socketed minion gems, and then for you, life, whatever resist you can get on there. And like I said in the intro, I am running a magic find setup, so I was looking for something that had a decently high increased rarity of items found. So there's that. You might want to look for that on a few pieces of your gear. And I also got a lucky bone offering buff, which I am using bone offering, but that's not necessary at all. But anyways, look at our link. So we have our Animate Guardian in here, and that's why you want the +2 to your level of the gem, just to give you your Guardian some more damage and life. And then we've got Meat Shield support. Again, this makes him defensive, so he sticks near me, and and it also gives him damage reduction and more damage. So it's like a defensive gem for your Animate Guardian, just to keep him alive. And then elemental damage attacks, again we're using Oro, so that's a good damage boost with Fortified, just another defensive buff for it. And I've run up to tier 16s, and my Animate Guardian has never died. So even on a 4-link like this, it's really strong. And Meat Shield is nice because it's defensive, so it sticks to me. And what I'm doing is I'm using 3 Writhing Jars because they make a worm enemy pop out, and that'll get your Chains of Command started, right? So you just pop a flask, he walks up, bam, kills him like that, and then you automatically get some animated weapons going. And one thing, so you just saw 2 worms pop out, you hit them, and only 1 weapon spawned. The reason why is because this has a built-in cooldown of like 0.05 seconds, really, really short, but if he hits and kills multiple minions with 1 swing, it's only going to give you 1 weapon, which kind of sucks. But anyways, let's go on to our next item here, my amulet. I was just looking for something with some dexterity and then a high life, again increased rarity and some resists, and that's pretty much it. That's all you really need here. A ring, again this is my rare ring. Again, just look for some life, some resists, and I needed some dexterity, so there, got some more dexterity on this slot. You could get more increased rarity here, I just didn't manage to do that. Now I'm using Essence Worm, and this is not too expensive these days, just a few chaos. The reason is because I'm using Mind Over Matter, So you see I have a lot of mana open. I have a free like 1033. Oh, sorry. So what Essence Worm does is I have my Anger socketed in here. So I'm using Hatred, which is a damage buff to everything because you get extra fire damage to your attacks, right? And since we're using Oro Sacrifice on our Guardian and weapons, that helps out quite a bit with their damage. And it makes Anger reserve no mana. It makes Precision reserve a little bit more, but since it's not a percent value, it's not that bad. So I can highly recommend using an Essence Worm just to give your mind over matter a little bit more oomph, so to speak. So basically we have like a 7,000 health pool, maybe 7,500 if you include the little bit of shield we have. But yeah, I can highly recommend Essence Worm. Next, let's look at my gloves. Again, just if you need more decks, this is a good spot to get them. And then just get some more life and whatever kind of resist you can get on here. And if you can get some rarity, again, that would be a good spot for it. Again, I didn't. Oh, let's look at our gems. So we've got a cast when damage taken here with Convocation, and also we're doing Immortal Call with an increased duration. And this helps out quite a bit. We don't really have any endurance charges like being brought in, but we have it linked with increased duration, and we also have some duration nodes on the tree here. I couldn't get down to these, I just didn't have enough points, but we have a good amount of increased duration on our tree, so Immortal Call I feel like is a pretty solid option, even without running endurance charges on this build. And then Convocation is nice just because if you get hit, all your minions come flying to you, they teleport on top of you, and it's like an extra defensive layer, and it helps your clear speed out a little bit because we are leap slamming into packs sometimes, and all your minions just get sucked back into you. Helps them speed up a little bit. Even with all the speed boosts that we've got on them, I feel like animated weapons don't actually move very fast. Maybe they don't actually get those bonuses from movement speed boosts, but Convocation helps out quite a bit. Next, our belt. You just want to look for something with a lot of life, some resists. If you need whatever you need, try to get them on here. If you can get armor, that would be nice too. And then last, our boots. Again, I was just looking for something with increased item rarity, high life, and some resists. And then my gems, my last gems here. So you might have noticed in the video, I am running Bone Offering, but I'm running it on totems, and I'm also running Scorching Ray. So you see we got multiple totems of Scorching Ray, Bone Offering, and our spell totem to make them both be able to be used with totems. So what they do is, so you summon two totems with multiple totems, right? So these are both Bone Offering totems. So usually what I do is I leap slam in, I'll drop my Bone Offering totems and start using Wave of Conviction, and then whenever my minions kill stuff, these automatically start using Bone Offering. And even though a totem's casting them, the totem is not getting the buffs. We actually still are getting the buffs with our minions, so don't worry about that. And the reason Bone Offering is good, again, like I said, I'm going all out on defense here. Every time you block and your minions block, you recover like almost 600 health, so it's actually quite nice. And you get a lot of extra block chance for spells and attacks. So I really recommend using Bone Offering. If you just want to go for like a more damage setup offering, that's fine too, but I've exclusively been using Bone Offering. Now Scorching Ray, if you don't know what it does, it shoots out like a little beam of fire straight ahead, and the longer it hits an enemy, the lower it makes the enemy's fire resistance. And again, Oro Sacrifice, there's big synergy with there. And I only drop this on bosses basically, so you want to drop 3 totems out, and each ray applies the debuff faster for Scorching Ray, so your Oro Sacrifice starts doing more damage quicker. And that's it for the items and gems. Again, my flask, I'm just using 3 Writhing Jars. Whenever you first go into a map, you just want to start popping some worms out, get some weapons spawned, and then start mapping after that. Oh, also, one note, these actually make you really tanky. I feel like these flasks are really underrated. So what you do is if you leap slam into a pack and you take a hit and you lose some mana and life, you instantly just pop a couple of these and like you regenerate back up to full like instantly, because they are instant recovery. So it works really well with Mind Over Matter. I've actually been enjoying that mechanic quite a lot. You just jump into a pack, you take a couple hits, you pop your flasks, and you're back up to full mana and life like instantly. So they actually make you feel pretty tanky. And then I'm running a sulfur flask for Consecrated Grounds with an ignite removal. I just wanted the extra regeneration for me and my minions from Consecrated Grounds. And then last, a life flask with bleed removal. And that's pretty much all you need. The skill tree, I'm not going to talk about it too much. Let's look at my gems real quick. These kind of gems are a little expensive that have life and increased minion damage. Percent increased life with percent minion damage, because they're both prefixes, so they're kind of hard to roll. I got lucky and actually found one myself, and then I bought another one for like 50 chaos or something. But you can also get abyssal jewels and just look for things with life and added fire damage to your minions. This one gives me some strength and dex, so that helped out with my dex a little bit. But basically you just want to look for like life and added fire damage to your minions on these kind of jewels. And maybe something like life steal for your minions wouldn't be bad either. But that's pretty much all you look for on your jewels. And I think that's it. Usually I would show a clip after this of me killing a boss, but since this is not a boss killer, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. If you like this build, if you think about playing it, drop me a like. I really appreciate that. It helps the channel out. If you want to subscribe, go ahead. And I'll be back in another few weeks probably with my next build guide. I've got another interesting one going. And this build made me a lot of money. Like I said, I'm playing it with a bunch of increased item rarity items. I didn't go full item rarity because it would have been a little bit more expensive, but this was my league starter, and I've made I found 5 Exalt drops, which is a little lucky. The item rarity helped out with that, I'm sure, but I've got a little bit more expensive build planned for my next build guide, so look for that in the next couple weeks. Again, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.